in 3 out of their 3 series so far.
Yeah.
So like that, while they did have not the best run versus Perplex in that dungeon, that should be like really heavily Golden Guardians favored.
Yeah, we'll have to see what we have in store as Golden Guardians and Sloth are set to get underway. It's going to be game number 1 in our lower bracket. Both teams facing elimination as Halls gets underway.
All right, so let's see what those two teams have in store for us in Halls. We didn't see Golden Guardians yet, but it is a time trial map, and we have actually seen them place 3rd in Halls with a time of 12 minutes and 22. The best time we've seen from Sloth was earlier with a 12 minutes 43. So still slower than Golden Guardians, but Golden Guardians time trial game was actually previously before 9.0.5, which means the Stoneborn Gargoyle nerfs haven't been in yet. So that means it's still going to be an incredibly close game between those two.
Yep, for sure. And I mean, it's within the realm, you know, that 20-second difference is within the realm of small mistakes, leaning the match either way. So I don't think there's too much of a difference here. It's all going to come down to execution. And we know that both teams have the potential to have clean runs on this dungeon. We saw Sloth do it about a couple hours ago. We've seen Golden Guardians have clean runs just this weekend. So, I mean, the pressure is on right now. Golden Guardians is playing for seeding in the global finals. Sloth is playing for even the slightest chance to just get in, right? Which it's a bit of an outside shot. They'd probably have to win the tournament to have any shot. But still, they're playing for pride. They're playing for even a sliver of a chance to get into the global finals.
Yeah, Sloth having a little bit of an issue here with that pride as they're about to finish it off, but people dropped incredibly low on those last few ticks. And Golden Guardians really dealing with this pride quite a bit faster, as they're already almost done with that second pull, spawning their 40% pride. So a pretty big difference here in time on execution here in the first pull. Not sure what went wrong for Sloth. Maybe something with the Stoneborn Gargoyle didn't work out perfectly for them, or maybe some of the offensive cooldowns didn't work out perfectly. Either way, Golden Guardians already quite a bit ahead, as Shimkin also goes down for Sloth. That's released immediately because you spawn right there, but still pretty big loss, as he also died right after pressing his combustion, it seems like.
Yeah, it looks like he died during his shifting power, which is where a lot of your damage comes from in your AoE combustion burst, which is really unfortunate. And what that also does is you lose all of the cooldown reduction that you gain from that shifting power. So his next combust is going to be off cooldown even even slower than it normally would be. So like, it's just compounding problems. Now, of course, they're gonna have to get through an entire single target manifestation, so he might be able to get the combust out before the next pull, but look at what this is costing them. Golden Guardians has already dealt with that prideful. They're already moving on to their third massive pull. Everything's already stacked up for them. They're about to go in with the power infused combust, and you know, Sloth is still halfway through this prideful.
Yeah, Golden Guardians definitely playing a lot cleaner and executing everything a lot better, as they're already on that third pull. They're going to be spawning that 60% pride right as this shard goes down. You can see the Stoneborn is also mind controlled already by either the Paladin J.B on the Venthyr, or Lip as well on the DK playing Venthyr as well. So they have two Venthyrs being able to charm those Stoneborns, helping them out with mainly single target, because the Stoneborns, they also do AoE with that breath. But they're much stronger on single target because of those melee attacks that are really valuable. The breath itself is nice for AoE, but not as big of an advantage as it is for like the prides and the bosses.
Yep, for sure. I mean, that's the thing, right? They have the cooldowns for the AoE and they have the gargoyles for the single target, which is just a really nice way to shift between damage profiles throughout the dungeon. Of course, I said that was a power infused combust, but they were actually saving the power infusion for the pull they're about to do now, and they might even give it to the Paladin, but it doesn't look like his wings is up, so they might not be doing that. Probably just go on the Fire Mage. But here we go, all of this trash being pulled onto the boss. You see the Sigil of Misery being used to keep mobs in place as well while they stack everything up, and now that everything is right on top of each other inside that Ring of Frost, the AoE cooldowns will come up, the combust will be used, and look at the burst damage coming out of I'm Fired Up here, easily topping 125k DPS in that combust window with the new legendary, just allowing for more burst damage. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, huge amount of damage coming out of the mage here from Golden Guardians, and how well executed as well by them, being able to get all of this trash down while also nuking the boss and mind controlling those gargoyles as they reach 30% raging. Now Sloth, on the other hand, did have a full team wipe, unfortunately, on their third shard pull. What happened was that their mage went down, and then all of the mobs were enraging. They were just like slightly not enough damage to finish off the pull, and then the tank goes down because you're missing that extra damage. All the mobs are in raging range, just huge amounts of tank damage going out, and then they had a full team wipe, which caused them to have all of the mobs reset, and now they're just struggling to get back in. Such a wipe is just going to be incredibly costly. If you use so many offensive cooldowns to get the trash low, and then you have a full team wipe, they all reset, and you have to do everything again without having those cooldowns available anymore. So just huge time loss for Sloth, unfortunately. But Golden Guardians, I mean, they're so clean. 5 minutes into the dungeon, 80% trash done. So they're spawning this Pride mid-boss fight to be able to cleave it down. This is so efficient if they manage to pull it off. And they are. I mean, everyone did drop pretty low, so they have to recover here with the shell being popped by Lip to reduce that magic damage a little bit. But yeah, just so clean by Golden Guardians.
I'm so confused. The beams on Halkias spawned, and Shakib just walked right through them without taking any damage. Maybe that's just the power of the bucko. I don't know. He definitely deserved to take damage for that there. Actually, I guess there's kind of a time frame where they don't do damage.
Yeah, there's like an initial.
Right? Yeah, that's probably.
Yeah, maybe that was it. He just believed, you know. He believed in the commitment to kill the boss before it actually triggers the damage, and that's what happened. So good job, Shakib, not moving, not giving in, as you're now moving past this trash to pull Echelon with that 80% Pride buff. Of course, you lose a little bit of an uptime here on that Pride because you have to do that skip, but it's still worth it because the trash that you can play in front of Echelon is actually really inefficient. You just have these gargoyles that they can pull that have a huge amount of HP, and everything else just really doesn't seem to be worth it. So that's why the teams are just playing it this way, that they proc the Pride previously and then just stealth up here.
Yeah, I think it's also nice for the Paladin, right? Because they have to either invisibility potion or they just have to die for a death skip since they don't have the Shadow Meld available. It's just safer for them to have that damage, or not damage boost, but the speed boost that the Prideful buff gives as well. It's pretty nice in general for them. So pretty safe. Good to see them skip it. I actually like what Golden Guardians did. They just committed the invisibility potion on the Paladin instead of just death skipping, so they didn't have to worry about the 5-second timer on the board. And it also looks nicer because at the top of the leaderboard it says 0 instead of 1 on the deaths counter, which is always kind of nice to see.
I agree. One more thing to note is that Yoda is actually also playing Necrolord here. We've seen some Vengeance Demon Hunters switch their Covenant to Necrolord, specifically in like Theater of Pain and Plaguefall, because of that Covenant ability that you get from the buffs there. But some Vengeance Demon Hunters also switch to Necrolord for dungeons where you don't need a Necrolord. So interesting to see this adaptation from the Demon Hunters, because Vengeance did get changed in 9.0.5. So interesting to see that some Demon Hunters opt to play different Covenants. It's always interesting to see the Demon spawn and just chasing down the Vengeance Demon Hunter.
The other cool thing is, like, as you were explaining that, he also showed off the new legendary that they've been using, which has a chance to not incur the cooldown of Fell Devastation when they cast it. Like, as you were saying that, he hit Fell Devastation and then instantly hit it again, which is just pretty nice for more demonic uptime, right? More metamorphosis uptime is always really good for them. So good to see that being used as well. It's pretty cool to see like a sort of gamble style build being used. And, you know, there's a little bit of RNG that comes into play, but generally speaking, any extra procs of that are pretty worth it here. But Golden Guardians now gearing up for the final big pull of the dungeon. Yoda has the Metamorphosis available, and it is popped. He doesn't have the Last Resort available, so he's going to have to pretty much make the best use of this Metamorphosis possible, which is dangerous because those bleeds are stacking up from the Vicious Gargants here. But here we go. Looks like he's pretty safe for the time being, and it looks like the trash is all getting burned down by I'm Fired Up here, as well as his teammates putting in a decent amount of effort too. And with only the Houndmaster alive, he's going to be totally fine, and they are home free with this pull. Fantastic execution there from Golden Guardians.
Yeah, that was really well done, as they only have the boss left at this point, and of course also the Stoneborns to help them out here. So interesting to see that they actually have both of them pulled into this initial pull immediately. We've seen different variations from other teams where they would only pull one Stoneborn into this initial pull, then mind control it once it's in raging range, and then pull the second Stoneborn in so they can have it for the mini-boss later. But Golden Guardians doesn't seem to want the Stoneborn for the mini-boss. They just decide it's more worth it to have on this boss, which does make sense, because with the new patch they have actually increased the amount of time that the Stoneborn is charmed. And it looked like with the other teams that the Stoneborn was hitting the mini-boss for the duration, and then after the mini-boss was dead, the Stoneborn was still up for quite a long time, but it didn't help you with the Pride because it was just hitting the neutrals instead. So it definitely seems to be more efficient to use both of them on the boss here. But it will make it more difficult for them to do the damage check on the next mini-boss in between those Dark Communion casts.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely a much more dangerous way to do it, but I feel like the gargoyle's really only used for insurance, right? Generally speaking, it's not too tough of a damage check to meet, considering we're not in the fortified setting. Like, maybe if we were in the fortified setting, it might be like something that you have to do, right? Is have that gargoyle for the mini boss and make sure it's hitting the mini boss. But yeah, on tyrannical, it doesn't have that extra HP. It should be able to be burned through with pretty much just the combustion and the dark transformation from the mage and the DK respectively, and then just the passive damage from the rest of your group should be plenty fine. Of course, they're going to be saving those cooldowns until the first Dark Communion cast goes off here, and once the healing is done from that, you can pop your cooldowns. You can see Fired Up even pre-prepping his Combust with the Disciplinary Command by casting that Frostbolt right before the Combust goes off, and then of course the Rune of Power, the Combust drop counts as your Arcane spell, so very easy proc of that 20% crit damage. Perfect execution there for anyone wondering how to use that Legendary now that it's buffed on live, and they should be just able to get through this burst damage phase here before the second cast of Dark Communion. But you know what? It is taking them a little bit longer than it usually does. It looks pretty close.
Actually, there we go. They did manage to pull it off. But yeah, it looked like it was taking quite a long time without that Stoneborn. But yeah, if they can pull this off all the time, then it really seems to be worth it. So you can see with the time as well, they're 11 minutes into the dungeon, and they're now dealing with this last Pride and the last boss. So this is going to be an incredibly quick run by Golden Guardians, maybe even the fastest run we've seen this tournament long, as JB is putting that Ash and Hollow down. Everyone is using their offensives as they're finishing off that Pride. They also popped the Bloodlust as well to help them out a little bit for that Pride. And then also just nuking the boss here with all their offensives. Combustion coming back up for I'm Fired Up as well, as he's just popping it, just doing a huge amount of damage. Look at JB, up to 15k DPS. He must love this Paladin playstyle, no? He did say he doesn't like Paladin, but doing so much damage, I mean, that must feel good as an MDI Paladin, just getting all of those buffs, doing all of this damage, it must feel good to top their damage meters, no?
I mean, I feel like if he's not playing a druid, he's upset in general. But there's got to be something that's really fun for a lot of players. I mean, I feel this way myself. When I'm playing something that's OP and I have a button that just wins when I hit it, I love that. That is so much fun for me. And maybe, maybe there's some people who don't like that, but for me, that's fun. And to see people do it, it's also fun. It's just such a ridiculous ability. Not only does the Ash and Hollow enable you to do sick damage, but the passive healing it does for the people standing in it means you can just double down on doing more damage. You don't have to worry about healing people because the Hollow does it for you. It's so disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, this is an 18 tyrannical boss, and they just barely needed a minute for this. As you can see, the Pride buffs just now ran out. We're 12 minutes 35 into the dungeon, and they're finishing off that last boss, winning that first game against Sloth. Well done, Golden Guardians.
There it is, Golden Guardians taking game number 1 in quite a convincing fashion against Sloth, taking that victory here in, we've been looking at how quickly, and we've really been trying to focus in on how well teams have adapted to the new meta, to adapting to roster changes and everything like that, Tettles. And Golden Guardians seems to be really hitting their stride this weekend.
Yeah, full comp swap from them. We know that they weren't playing the Holy Paladin Shadow Priest last cup. Now they're playing Holy Paladin Shadow Priest. Also, notably, they're playing Venge's Demon Hunter with Necrolord, using that reworked Necrolord in Halls of Atonement. Thought that was kind of a weird pick, I must say. But results don't lie. 5.5k DPS coming in from Yoda. That's, I would say, a pretty considerable amount. He is a big advocate of the Spirit Bomb lifestyle, so it's definitely gonna increase his damage by a lot. But I thought it was interesting the fact that they did swap up so much, Jack.
Yeah, and this is the team that is this is the veteran team that has had so much churn going on throughout everything in Season 1 here in Agura that we've been looking at, well, when are they going to make it to Sunday? When are they going to be able to progress? And at this point, they've really been making great strides this weekend and improving. And this is probably the best we've seen yet from them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they have performed so well today and yesterday as well. And I mean, I think Sloth is definitely a team that we saw them perform well in Halls earlier. But even if Sloth would have played perfectly, they still wouldn't have beaten Golden Guardians' time here. So I do think Golden Guardians definitely shaping up their play a little and just really just putting it all together, right? Last cup, they were a little bit late with that comp swap, so they didn't adjust to that Paladin, Shadow Priest, Mage composition. But now they have it all figured out, and they're they're doing really well, and they're just adjusting really well to the new patch as well, which is always nice to see.
Yeah, and it is also going to start setting our sights a little bit onto Plaguefall as well, Zyro, which, we've had one victory, one loss for the side of Golden Guardians and Plaguefall this weekend, but they're sticking to their Druid guns here.
Yeah, and after watching the match against Perplexed, it's definitely like a safety play or a comfort play, right? Having the mass root available for Spitefuls is kind of nice, but I feel like it's more of a luxury than needed, right? The Holy Paladin definitely would be a altogether faster run in this dungeon, and we saw that when Perplexed ran at like 2 minutes faster than them. That being said, I mean, it's going to come down to consistency for them, right? Even with, the comfort pick and the Druid, they weren't able to put it together against Perplexed. And, Sloth, even though they looked kind of bad in that Halls of Atonement compared to what they saw earlier, if they're able to play like they played earlier against us Gargoyles stream, they could take a game off of Golden Guardians here. So Golden Guardians really has to, pull it together and show us a match just like what we saw from them in Halls of Atonement.
Yeah, and speaking of that Halls of Atonement titles, what do you want to highlight for us there?
Yeah, I didn't feel like there was too much to talk about. I felt like Golden Guardians just had an absolutely spectacular run. Unfortunately for Sloth, though, just some issues towards the beginning of the dungeon. They end up having, it's just raging, right? Raging, beating up your tank. Once your tank ends up dying, then the rest of the trash pack is just going to go not your way. Like, you see that full pack is just casting on him while it's in rage. And that happened. On the other side, Golden Guardians had what is literally a perfect run, and honestly, Golden Guardians needs to just continue to look forward, continue to have perfect runs and playing their own game plan. And I do really think that they can do that. I think that they finally have started to hit their stride. I think that there have been a lot of weekends where it's like there's a lot going on, there's a lot going wrong, and but I do finally think that they have hit their stride in terms of like synergy between amongst all the members. They finally have fielded the comp that looks like that's working for them as much as possible, and they're making good decisions with their compositions, like even different stuff that otherwise other people wouldn't be running. And I think that that's even apparent in the Plaguefall. But I think that the top level that they need to be working on is continuing to be more consistent.
Yeah, and it's relevant not only for this weekend, of course, to be able to improve a lot of their standings as well, but we have our global finals coming up in spring, Zyro, and, that's really a big opportunity, especially, assuming no other class changes, big dungeon changes. It's kind of time for teams to be able to relax, start getting more practice in, and start perfecting some of these strategies. Because, not only has there been churn on the roster on the side of Golden Guardians, but all these dungeons are steadily changing with their strats.
And not only that, but also just to take a breather, right? We've been doing MDI nonstop on a lot of these top end teams for the past 8 weeks, right? Time trials one weekend, cup the next, time trials one weekend, cup the next. It's tiring. It weighs on you a little bit. So having like a nice month-long break in between now and the global finals is going to be a lot of time for these teams to relax, reset, and get ready and get into a new mindset for the global finals. And I think the cool thing about global finals is we tend to see a lot of overhaul of strategies and new tech kind of released for the global finals. So it's really good to have that reset time. But the thing for Golden Guardians here is really to try to end the Cup Series on a high note. Because the last thing you want to do going into the Global Finals is like take that negative energy from not really performing up to your standards in all 4 of the Cups and then apply that to the Global Finals. So yeah, ending up this Cup on a nice little lower bracket streak, maybe even taking the Cup would be insane for them. Be a huge boost of confidence.
And they know already that because Gargoyle, for example, got knocked out pretty quickly, they have that good chance getting a tiebreaker, maybe even overtaking them as well, depending on how they perform. But probably one of the biggest things is that a victory right here will be able to propel Golden Guardians into Sunday, which is something that we have not seen from them for the past 3 Cup weekends. So a lot going to be on the line for them as they continue to be improving. Let's see how game number 2 fares as Golden Guardians is up 1 versus Sloth.
All right, so let's see what they can show us here in that Plaguefall. And yeah, I mean, Golden Guardians, they are in like the best position they can be right now, right? They're playing against Sloth, they're already 1 game up, and Obey Alliance, which is another team that they're close in points with, has to play against Echo later, which Echo unexpectedly in the lower bracket, which is the number 1 seeded team here. So going to be very difficult for Obey Alliance to even win that one. That would be really good for the Golden Guardians if they would be eliminated later against Echo, higher chances for Golden Guardians to get a higher seed. But now the game did start, so let's see what they can do on this first pull. We've seen many teams have issues with this initial pull, especially because we have Grievous and we also have Spiteful. So if some of the mobs die a little bit earlier than others because of the discrepancies in HP, then all of a sudden you have all of these Spiteful shades hitting your melee players.
Oh, you know what? I was sneezing apparently. And yeah, we're going for a bigger pull here on the side of Golden Guardians. They're going for an even bigger pull, right? They go for that extra pack right after the AoE we just saw Sloth pull off. Looks like Yoda prisons the one Fungalmancer so that they can keep it high HP for the spell steals for Fired Up. And again, just perfect execution from Golden Guardians. One of the things I feel like is really interesting here, every single time we've seen Golden Guardians go up against another team, is they always look like they're just that much safer whenever there's AoE damage going off. Like almost like the Holy Paladin can't really keep up with the AoE damage without having their cooldowns popped, whereas the more superior passive non-cooldown healing from the Druid just seems like it's a lot safer of a play. Maybe that's one of the reasons that JB has kind of opted into playing that in this dungeon.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Resto Druid can deal with these prides pretty well. Lots of offensive cooldowns you can commit, but don't have to, because you're already really strong outside of it as well. If you're playing Soul of the Forest, for example, just having those huge wild growths helping you out. Having the Convoke as well, in case you do need it, or the Trank to help you out. If you're tranking, you do want to make sure you're telling the other people not to snipe you with that debuff from the Pride, but they should be able to not do that, as they're now engaging the first boss with all of those slimes. So interesting to see. This is something they haven't done before, right? We didn't see them do this against Perplexed. They were pulling the slimes alone and the boss after. It could have been because of different patrols, because those Plague Belchers, they patrol left and right, and sometimes they're so close to the boss that maybe you would proximity pull them. So maybe that is actually what happened the last time, and that's why they didn't pull it. But it's good to see that they're adapting here, pulling the slimes into the boss, just getting a huge amount of damage on the boss as well, while cleaving out everything else. And JB using that Moonkin Convoke to get some extra damage on the boss too.
It looks like Sloth is trying to go with the mage strategy as well, where they spell steal the Fungalmancer, but it's just not going as well for them. Like, look at their health bars on this Prideful. The mage definitely doesn't have enough stacks to be doing good damage here. The Cauterize now popped for him. This is going very south for them, and they're having issues keeping the group alive. The Holy Paladin is really struggling here. Like, I'm pretty sure Mark is having to pick up a lot of the load just helping out the teammates. This is really rough. Now, they are going to just barely be able to get through it, but I think a lot of what's going to happen here is, whether or not Shim is able to keep that buff up, and honestly I can't really tell based off of his character model, because usually we're used to seeing a giant troll like we see from Fired Up on the side of Golden Guardians, but you will be able to see, I guess, here with the burst on the boss. But man, I mean, this was just significantly slower than what we saw from Golden Guardians here. They've already dealt with the boss. They're already setting up for the first massive AoE pull.
Yeah, Golden Guardians definitely dealing with all of this a lot cleaner and a lot faster, as they're now gathering up this really important pull, because this is a pull they actually wiped to earlier. So this is the one pull where they had the full team wipe when the Pride spawned. So let's see if they can execute it properly now. As I'm Fired Up actually had aggro, it seemed like, as he also popped his cooldowns, his offensive cooldowns, as well as his defensives, and now PI being buffed from Shakib too. Looks like they're fine so far, but now they still have the Pride to deal with.
And no blob spawning this time. JB will be safe. He won't get bopped on the head for just healing his group this time around. And there will not be a full team fight on the Prideful, which is something that went wrong last time around. It's something weird happening on the side of Sloth, and this had to have been planned. They actually just killed the Fungalmancer during the boss, so they won't have that available for Shim to keep taking. Later on, I had to catch myself there because they were very close to letting the boss heal there, and after the fact, they have this massive Plague Belcher who's probably eaten a few too many of those slimy morsels.
That's a big Plague Belcher for sure. They really didn't care about those slimy morsels reaching it, which means it's going to take them a while to finish off, and it's also doing a lot of damage to the tank here, as he doesn't have any last resort left. But Golden Guardians, I mean, so clean at this point. It's really good to see that they fixed their mistakes from earlier today, and did also shape up their strategy a little bit, just pulling those slimes into the first boss, and then just gathering up this second pull so much cleaner. JB being able to stay alive, and yeah, just doing a really, really good job dealing with all of this, as they're now dealing with those tentacles as well. You can see the Plague Belchers basically being used to kill those tentacles off. And it's really nice to see how they tank them as well. It's basically just Lip on the DK tanking one tentacle while Yoda is tanking the other one. So just really nicely done by them as they now pull the Pride, looks like on top of the mini-boss. So they're going to be cleaving down the mini-boss and the Pride with those Plague Borers that have the explosion does have a target cap. But of course the Pride and the mini-boss are only 2, so it will hit both of them equally, and that means it's really, really efficient to pull both of them at the same time.
And if they're fast enough, which it looks like they're going to be able to pull these last 2 Plague Borers on top of some of the trash here, which means they don't have to worry about doing too much damage to them. But the really nice effect of having these Plague Borers here is that you get it on that congealed slime, which reduces the amount of AoE damage you do to everything else, but that doesn't affect the friendly fire from the Plague Borers. So all 3 mobs go down instantly. That's a big slowdown point of the dungeon that has been completely skipped for Golden Guardians. And now, should they choose to, and yes, it looks like they are going to, they're going to pull the rest of the trash on top of the boss, pop all of their cooldowns with the Prideful buff that they just got, and be able to blast through everything. And they have everything available here. They have the power infusion with the combustion. They have the Army of the Dead, the Dark Transformation just now coming up for Lip as well to help burst down the single target damage. And man, that was just perfect execution from Golden Guardians here. All they have to make sure they do is get most of these slimes that are metamorphosing, and they do. JB still won't go down to those casts, and they're on to the second phase just like that, while also dealing with all the trash in the room. That's how you got to do it in the MDI.
Yeah, that was just incredibly well executed by the Golden Guardians, as Sloth did have a little bit of an issue again as Enclair went down on that DK. They did manage to battle rest him back up, but it did take a while for them because it was the engineering rest that they had to use, so it took a while for them to be able to get it off. But now they did, as they're finishing off this Pride, everyone dropping incredibly low with that Grievous, just making it harder to heal that Pride. But yeah, it's only 1 death on the board, but you see the difference. It's 75% trash versus 44, and Golden Guardians already fighting Dr. Iker. So a huge difference in time here between those 2 teams, even if Sloth did not have any major deaths. It's just the way that they played the bosses, the pulls and so on. It was just quite a bit slower compared to Golden Guardians doing such a good job, pulling so much, and also using that mage buff, that Wonder Growth on Fired Up, really like a lot cleaner than what Sloth did at the start.
Yeah, I mean, it honestly looks like Sloth just didn't have enough time to prepare for a insanely fast strat in this dungeon, so they opted to go for a more safe strat in this dungeon where they can get very few deaths, and they're really not going to set themselves up for success just from playing better than the other team. They kind of just need the other team to make some major mistakes in order to win. And, you know, that's no fault of theirs. They're one of our newer teams to the MDI this year, only coming in last cup. So they probably haven't had enough time to put strats together in literally every single dungeon. And it kind of shows a little bit. They have some fantastic runs, but they have some, less than stellar runs. And they still have a few of those, uncharacteristic deaths to pulls, such as this one right here with Enkler going down. So it's a little unfortunate to see, but I do like the growth that we've seen from the team from the cup we saw 2 weeks ago. They definitely played a lot better this cup, and they're a team that I'd like to see more of moving forward.
I definitely agree. Still lots of room to improve, but seeing the dungeons that they did practice a lot, like that Halls and that Necrotic Wake, really shows that they can be one of those top tier teams if they get more practice in and if they compete more in the MDI. They're really new, so it's definitely not something that we should be expecting for from them, but yeah, they're doing a good job, as Golden Guardians is now, though, gathering up this next pull in front of the third boss. And the one advantage of having a Druid healer is that you actually have a 5 Night Elf comp. So instead of having to pull the middle pack on this island to the left side, everyone else running through, you can just have everyone run through and then you shadow melt, right? So a little bit of a time save here for Golden Guardians to not have to do this pull differently because of the Paladin not being able to be a Night Elf, so there's no shadow melt on it. So a little bit of an advantage here and there from having the Druid. Still, of course, overall the damage is going to be a lot lower from the rest of the Druid over the Paladin, but some things really save you time from having the extra utility that the Druid provides, and also just being able to shadow melt off certain pulls.
Yeah, I mean, the utility really can't be understated, right? The root and the master can be really useful. Being able to have Shadow Meld, like you mentioned, is incredibly useful. So while sometimes we'll look at the overall meters at the end of a dungeon and be like, whoa, the Holy Paladin did 6k DPS and the Restored Druid only did 1k. Wow, it must be better. You got to remember, you know, there are some intangibles that also come into effect too. But really the biggest intangible is just pure execution, and that's something that Golden Guardians is doing perfectly right now. They are not making any mistakes. 0 deaths last dungeon, 0 deaths this dungeon, and they're doing it at a time where they really need to. They're really pulling out all the stops, and they're playing fantastically.
Yeah, most definitely. We also saw Full Moon being procced by JB. That's all he has to do to make up for missing that Ashen Hollow. Just needs to proc a Full Moon every time on that Convoke. Well done, as there's a huge amount of damage coming in on Domina Venomblade here, as they also get out those Assassins. Since 9.0.5, you cannot actually pop your mirror images anymore as a mage and get them out. That has been fixed. So now they have to just get them out manually. Everyone has to walk there and use anything on those nets to be able to get them out, on those webs. Usually it's the tank just jumping around. Vengeance Demon Hunter is incredibly mobile, being able to do so. Sometimes we see the mages with altar time can also be really useful. But of course it is better for damage if it's your tank that is doing it.
Yep, for sure. Now just getting through Domina Venomblade here. Easily down below 30%. Just got to deal with a single target nukes here. Lip gonna go ahead and walk out with that stun and then quickly move back in. Of course, able to AMS the stun, so doesn't have to worry about that. And now that they just dealt with that final Brute Assassin, not going to be too much of an issue here for Golden Guardians. Even on Tyrannical, they're able to burst through most of the problem phases on this boss. And, you know, even if they did have issues, like we saw, for instance, from Perplexed in this dungeon, where Ryzen was kind of unable to keep up with the healing, they have that Resto Druid, which just feels a little bit more of a better spot healer than the Holy Paladin. So it's a much safer choice, I feel like, in this dungeon. You know, safer in that if you make mistakes, it can heal you a little better, but I think still definitely slower in the damage department, right? Like, I feel like we'll have a really good comparison of what the Resto Druid is like in this dungeon compared to a Holy Paladin run. Once we see this run from Golden Guardians, if it stays at 0 deaths, if I had to guess, it's still going to be about a minute slower than what we saw from Perplexed.
Yeah, that's very possible still. We do have also, one thing to notice also that the Mass Root is incredibly valuable here in Plaguefall, not only because of the slimes that you can master in the first boss, but also because of the affix is Spiteful, right? Having Mass Root for Spiteful on some of these pulls is also just so much safer. For example, in the first boss, when you pull all of those slimes on top of the boss, you're gonna have like 20 Spitefuls that spawn. So if you can use that Mass Root to just keep them all in place and no one else is touching them, it's really, really helping out. And the Spitefuls are also gonna be, it's also going to be spawning here, right? So it's also going to be helpful in this area with JB using that Mass Root.
Oh yeah, oh there
we
so
go.
He talked about him using it, but he hasn't used it yet. But there it goes now. He got a large portion of the Spitefuls, only 1 or 2 making it through, and I think a couple of them got broken out by maybe some dot spreading as well. But with all of the mini ads gone, they only have Ichor Flesh left, and looks with the Master Root on cooldown, they'll have to use things like the Sigil of Misery in order to keep things in place. But they have a lot of extra AoE tools, right? They have the Mind Bomb if they need that as well. They have the Ring of Frost from Fired Up if they need to use that too. They have plenty of tools to back up that Master Root when it's off cooldown. And with Ichor Flesh down, they still have. Wow, that was weird. Did they just leave one slow devoted in the back to proc their Prideful? I feel like that's not something they intended to do. It just happened accidentally. Kind of weird.
It's nice to have Bile Flesh also teleport back, because it also ports to the furthest away. So maybe that was the reason, so they actually have it spawn in the back. Oh, now they're pulling the Pride on top of the boss, actually. Very difficult thing to do. So we'll see if they'll be able to pull it off, because there's a huge amount of damage from Stradama already with that rain coming in. And they don't have that many disease dispels as you would have with a Paladin comp, right? Because Druids are not actually able to dispel diseases. So a little bit more damage coming in on the group without that Paladin dispel. But it should be no problem for JB, as he's just spamming those wild growths on the group, even just convoking in Moonkin form. He knows he doesn't need that convoke for healing. He just uses it for damage to just get the boss down faster.
Yeah, and on top of that, they have a lot of great tools to kind of heal through the Prideful plus the rain damage, right? You saw the AMZ from the DK, the Alter Time from Fired Up. Plenty of mitigation tools to go ahead and stack that. They even have the the Vampiric Embrace from the Shadow Priest for a little bit of extra healing if they really need that too. So they have a really great comp for just dealing with that damage here with the Resto Druid, and I actually kind of like it. Now, of course, the time to beat for Perplexed, if I look at my spreadsheet here really quickly, they had a 1541 time in this dungeon. That was with those 2 pretty costly deaths on the 3rd boss. But, you know, I'm interested to see how close they're able to get. I thought it'd be about a minute slower, but to be honest, it's going to be pretty close. They have like a 20-25 second intermission phase, and then they'll be able to pretty quickly burst the boss down with that final combust. Doesn't look like any other cooldowns are going to be up, so it might take a little bit of time. But it's still going to be a pretty swift time here. Definitely faster than their previous run yesterday.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it really did increase their time quite a bit here, and doing such a good job with the execution as well. They might, as you said, even beat Perplex times, or at least come close to it, right? Perplex probably still like 20 seconds faster approximately, but that might really just be that Paladin damage difference, right? To be, of course, on the Druid being so useful, having so much utility, but outside of that, the damage difference is still gonna matter, especially on those bosses when you just don't have that Ashen Hollow paired with that Prideful buff. But they're now dodging those last couple of tentacles and finishing off Stradama. And I mean, yeah, this is exactly what we want to see from Golden Guardians, making it to that Sunday for the first time as they win their series against Sloth here.
That's right. It's a very big.
Oh, we didn't see it. I wanted to see a fist bump from JB.
Oh, you should have, all right. That's a very big win for the Golden Guardians because they are, like you mentioned, going on to Sunday for the first time. It's happening for them, and they have at least secured a tiebreaker with Does Gargoyle Stream here titles. Potentially going a little bit further, but we'll see.